Welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Broaddus.
And I'm Ashley Ward.
And you're listening to the What Matters podcast, and our mission
to spotlight top RIAs, wealth managers, and investment professionals who are redefining wealth management.
Join us as we dive into their journeys, strategies, and insights.
Whether you're an investor or an inspiring pro, this is for you.
Get ready for impactful conversations on the What Matters podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the What Matters podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broaddus.
And I'm Ashley Ward.
Today, we're excited to have a special guest joining us, Jeff Broaddus. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Vice President of Operations at ISC Group in Dallas.
Jeff, with your extensive experience in leadership roles in financial services, we're eager to hear your insights and have you join us today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And it's Broaddus, but I've been called worse. So,
well, I appreciate you saying that. My last name has been butchered since, as long as I can remember. So,
builds character.
Well, let's dive right in. So, Jeff, let's start by exploring your unique journey in the industry. Can you share with us and our listeners your origin story and the experiences that led you to your current role now at ISC Group?
Absolutely. From a financial services industry perspective, I got started in the industry at Fidelity Investments in 2014. So started there like most people do on the phones, answering phone calls from retirement plan participants. And I was taking phone calls, studying, you get your license. I started working my way into their workplace planning and advice team. So giving kind of financial advice to, plan participants that would call in, and then found a niche in the 401k sales arena at Fidelity. And so for those of you who don't know, Fidelity owns about a third of the market share. So pretty good group to kind of work your way into, and had some success there. Fidelity is a great training ground. You learn a lot. Was fortunate enough to have Fidelity kind of pay my way through my MBA program. And once I finished my master's, started looking elsewhere and landed at Marsh McLennan, which is a very large insurance brokerage firm, as well as a financial services advisory firm. And so at the Marsh McLennan here in the Southwest region, so Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana kind of thing, I helped expand the practice and our book of business over the course of the better part of 4 years, at which point I'd met Scott, our current CEO, and we'd actually been having conversations for, 18 months. Hey, we've got maybe a 401k advisor position open, or what do you think about this? And then eventually Scott had come back from a stakeholder and shareholders meeting where the entire discussion centered around succession planning. And so in our kind of usual monthly, bi-monthly lunches that we would have, Scott brought up, hey, I think I want to start looking at building a succession plan. My roadmap maybe looks like it's got about 10, 15 more years on it. So what do you think about coming on and joining me as the Vice President of Operations and helping drive kind of our strategic direction from where we're at now into the future? So it's been a fast and furious 10, 11 months now. Mike and I were talking a little bit before this about just how busy it's been, but busy is good. So I'm very thankful and challenged every single day.
So let me ask you this: you've been at ISC for about how long now?
Going on 11 months.
Oh, so you're pretty new there.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about ISC? You guys
absolutely.
are about 1.5 billion AUM. Again, don't quote me on that. Our information comes from public records. So, And how did the company get there? Was it organic growth, inorganic growth?
Oh, great question. So the firm was founded in 1987. Great year, by the way. Some of us might have been born then. And the original founder really focused on kind of building out a niche in what he saw to be an underserved kind of segment of the employer-sponsored plan arena. So nonprofits that are not subject to ERISA that offer retirement plans to their people. They've been under-regulated, if you will. Some might say ERISA is over-regulated, but who knows? And so, in that you tend to see high fees, lack of service. So at that point in time, he actually started taking a fiduciary style approach that you would take in the ERISA space. So think like corporate 401k plans, and applying that into the nonprofit arena. And over the course of the past, 30 something years, we've actually really built out a very substantial practice in that particular space. We do a lot with the mental health and disability centers in the state of Texas. We have relationships with actually the majority of them. And then that business kind of started to spur its way into what I would coin or call it like an affiliated advisor model. So think of, your like LPLs, Cetera, so on and so forth, where, Mike or Ashley, if y'all had a book of business, somewhere like a Raymond James where you're kind of a captive advisor, and you said, you know what, I really kind of want to do my own thing. I like the idea of being an entrepreneur in this particular space, but I want to have a little bit more freedom, right? So advisors are able to step onto our broker dealer and RIA and kind of hang their hat or have us serve as the compliance mechanism, provide some technology to them at an aggregated kind of lower cost, if you will, so that you can go out and build Mike's retirement advisory practice. So that practice kind of started to grow over the course of that 30 years, and now we have 54 advisors in that particular vertical. In the employer-sponsored plan arena, we have about $1 billion in total assets. So total, I know you mentioned like 1.8. We're somewhere between 3 and 3.5 billion in assets under advisement at this point in time. And then here recently, and I think we might get to this a little bit later, but so if you look at those two as kind of two verticals we're in, the third vertical that we're in is what I would call like fixed income services. So the first element of that is as we started to deepen our relationships with these nonprofit organizations, what we found is that a lot of them, due to like Texas state regulation or whatever it might be, are required to maintain a certain amount of like cash on hand, almost like an emergency fund, if you will. And there are some very specific rules around what that money can and can't be invested in. So we provide cash management services for a lot of those nonprofit entities, investing them, based upon duration and risk, liquidity, that kind of thing, to hopefully earn them a little bit more than maybe just money sitting in a checking account or a savings account somewhere. The last element is really our kind of what has exploded over the past, let's call it 24 months. And so we provide execution services for the structured product space. So what does that mean? Ashley is your advisor, Mike, and you just won the Powerball. Congratulations. Contrary to maybe a standardized mixture of investments, stocks, bonds, and what have you, Ashley would say, let's look at this sliver, maybe 5% of the total assets, and let's diversify that into a space that maybe has some characteristics of stocks and bonds and maybe a little bit of kind of like an annuity style type of characteristic. And so that would be your structured product space. So Ashley goes on to a technology partner, almost kind of like an Amazon type situation where you would say, okay, well, I want, these characteristics. I don't want these things. Maybe I want it to pay me a coupon. Maybe I want it to be callable, whatever it is. And that system pushes it out to all the major issuers or banks. So think, RBC, JP Morgan, Barclays, what have you. They look at it, they decide if they're going to bid on it, what the bid's going to be. That fires it back through the technology platform. Ashley and you sit down, you select yes, and then from there it goes to the issuer, gets made. But there's not an efficient and cost-effective way to get that product from the issuer to your account. So that's where we step in. We step in and kind of like an Uber Eats driver, we'll pick up your order and we bring it to your account and drop it off. So that has been that particular element of our business, while it's a team of 4 right now, has grown to become about 20-25% of our annual revenue. So we're extremely excited about that particular piece. Do you feel like that answers your question?
Yeah. And let me ask you this. So in total, how many advisors and how many total teammates do you guys have now?
Yeah, so we're pushing right around the 70 range in total, kind of reps as well as home office employees. 54 of those would be what I'll call like the affiliated advisors who have chosen to kind of hang their hats on the ISC broker dealer and ISC RIA, and then go out there and kind of stand up their own practices. And so they have a choice when they do that. They can either, say, hey, I'm going to call my practice, Jeff Broaddus retirement plans, or they can say, well, I'm just going to wear the ISC purple, if you will, and affect business in that way. So there's a couple of different ways that they do it.
So the let's say in those 54 advisors or that are under the ISC umbrella, they more so operate autonomously and you utilize you guys for the back end of everything.
Yes, that's a good understanding of it. We'll provide some operational support. We go out and, for instance, I actually just did an RFP for a technology partner to host websites and provide some marketing for us. So we're going to be leaving one group, going to another. So they would run through us in that, because there's some, efficiencies of scale, right, with that when we all go together to one group. As well as compliance oversight, lest we forget them. Always have to give a shout out to compliance. But as long as we're doing things that are compliant in manner, and then they have access to some of the technological tools, everything else, you have wide open spaces. You can kind of affect your business in whatever way is legal and compliant that you see fit.
Thank you.
So Jeff, throughout your career, from working at Fidelity, your roles at Marsh McLennan, now at ISC, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned throughout your career in this industry, and any advice with that for aspiring advisors or looking to really excel?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I learned early on was, in this particular industry, and really I think at large, you really truly have to develop a love for learning and continuing education, right? In this industry, in order to grow and do more business, ultimately you're going to need to get a few different licenses, and then, oh, by the way, maybe a graduate degree or some sort of professional designation, right? But really learn to love the journey and the education through the process. The other thing is, again, I don't know if it's necessarily indicative of this particular industry or not, but building relationships with individuals, both internally as well as within, whatever your business community is. If nothing else, coming to the table and just seeking to learn from those individuals, because we all have different ways of looking at something, and inevitably when you are presented either with a problem or whatever it might be, being able to kind of think back and say, what, Mike had this particular experience, we talked about that, it can really shed kind of light and add value to how you might approach it and help you advance your practice and your career. The last thing I would say is kind of to the people element, right? Scott and I talk about this a lot, and I think his former mentor is the one who kind of brought it up with him. But people are the most challenging part of this. They're the best part of it, but they're also the most challenging part. And so continuously working on kind of your interpersonal skill set to ensure that, especially when you're sitting in an advisory seat, right? People have expectations of you. They have expectations that you're kind of cool, calm, and collected. They're looking to you for advice, and oftentimes it spans well beyond just the financial element. Sometimes you become, a psychologist or a counselor or whatever it is. And so, being able to kind of put yourself in a position where, you are educated, well connected, have the experiences that you can then lean on when you're actually dealing interpersonally with people will help anyone grow, whether it's this industry or any industry.
And I think that kind of leads me into my next question there, talking about success and ISC's success. You guys have generated quite the success with, now you said 3 to 3.5 billion AUM, 54 advisors. Can you tell us how you and the team at ISC Group has really differentiated yourself in your firm as a whole in such a competitive market? Any strategies that you think have really been essential to your firm's success?
Yeah. So again, I think learning to evolve is, one of the things, kind of that back to the continuing education element, constantly striving to learn, what's new, and then being amenable to the idea that, hey, I need to change up what I'm doing. I mean, throughout the course of our history, right, we've seen the financial services arena go from simply kind of brokers that are more of like salespeople, order takers, to now what you're seeing more in the industry is that kind of CFP, consultative approach type of model. And so, one of the things that we've done and are continuing to do is kind of pivot along with the marketplace, educate ourselves on what is actually going well in the marketplace, what's selling, versus what our business model is, and then making adjustments. We like to say that after we kind of survey our competitors in the landscape, okay, so is there an element that we should change for our business? And then the next questions are, is it good for the end client? Is it good for the firm? And is it good for our reps? And if we can answer yes to all three of those questions, then it's something that we'll then seek to pull the trigger on. One of those things is, we've actually started here very recently, actually with our internship class that we have for this summer. We are making a heavy push into marketing ourselves on, things like podcasts. We're putting out our own YouTube, doing drip marketing campaigns through a variety of different mediums. So, trying to step into kind of 2024 versus if you kind of backtrack to 20 years ago, our advisors were more so just marketing one-on-one, right? They would join a local Rotary Club or whatever it is and go out and kind of shake hands and meet people. And not that that's not an important element of it all, but, really focusing on kind of the digital age and how we can maintain our relevance in that is something that, we are pushing to heavily utilize.
Thank you. And so with your heavy focus on people and working with nonprofits, I'm wondering if you by chance have a client story that you could share with us and our listeners where you felt like really exemplified the values and the impact that you or one of your teammates have made at ISC.
Yeah. So, with one of our mental health and disability centers, we have kind of a core team here in the home office that spends a lot of time, not just with the committee, but, one of our differentiators, if you will, is we spend a lot of time out at the centers, meeting with employees, getting to learn, their personal story. And, there was a recent conversation that was had where, again, if we rewind the clock, one of our advisors met this person when they started and got them enrolled in the plan, has had multiple conversations with them all throughout the course of their, career there. And that's one unique thing that we find is that people, unlike maybe in the corporate arena, in the nonprofit space, they tend to kind of stick with one job and then retire from it. So through education was actually able to get this person to now where the last meeting they had, they sat down and, did some calculations, did some planning, and looked at it and said, hey, you know what? Not only are you on track to retire, but you can actually retire a little bit early. And it may seem small, but it's those kinds of conversations that, definitely from our perspective, really kind of solidify and add back into the why is it that we do this? Well, we're actually helping people. We're not just out here getting paid for financial advice that kind of floats off into the wind somewhere. It actually has like a real impact on people's lives. And so, I would say, there's probably 100 other stories or whatever similar to that, but those are the ones that really kind of those are the stories that really, again, kind of solidify why is it that we do this.
Absolutely. I love that.
And so talk to us about, um, the growth of the team and where you guys see yourselves in 5 years from now, or even longer than that, right? You said that, in total, you guys have gotten to around $3.5 billion right now in assets under management underneath your umbrella. Where do you see that going to?
Great question. So we actually just had another kind of shareholder stakeholder meeting in Crested Butte, Colorado last week, and this was a big topic of conversation. The last time that we met, one of the initiatives was my role, and now here I am kind of delivering some of the initiatives that we've been able to make progress on. But the overarching initiative is growth. So we have been, and ultimately until about 12 months ago, were this very stable, what I would kind of coin as like a small cap value type company, right? Where we've got no debt, we have good operating margins, and as Scott and the rest of the team sat down, they were thinking, well, we want to build a legacy and grow, and not just for the next 5 years, but the next 15, 30 years. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is we're looking at that 54 kind of core rep base and seeing where their various competencies are, having succession planning conversations with them so that we can then in turn start to bring in what we would call like an associate advisor. So someone to come in and start to learn the business. And then from there, maybe Mike, if you're the advisor, you lop off the kind of bottom performing portion of your book, and that frees you up to continue to grow, but it also gives this advisor some real clients kind of right out of the gate so that they can grow. And then the idea would be, instead of kind of 54 individual advisors, we would have 54 practices that are self-sustainable. We're looking at a multitude of things, like we've got one advisor who is just a phenom in and of herself, but she has her law degree, she's an accountant, and then, oh, by the way, she's also a financial advisor. And so, we're having conversations about that model, if we can build kind of semi-family office style situations where, we have a lawyer kind of present in the office, a CPA, build that synergy so that there's a referral source. And then another element that we're looking at is, let's face it, we're a small player in this game in comparison to what I would call like some of the aggregators, which are the groups out there that are private equity backed or whatever it is, and they're going out and they're buying up all these different advisory firms and offering huge checks to do so. So, we can't compete in that particular arena, especially with the money, right? But what we can do is compete from a culture perspective. And when we think about building kind of synergies from a referral source perspective, we like the model that like a Marsh McLennan has, where they've got employee healthcare brokers, they've got property casualty brokers, and then the financial services team as well. So we're toying with the idea of what would it look like for us to acquire a benefits shop or a property casualty shop to, again, just kind of build out that synergistic element where, hey, we can do it all in-house for you.
Real cool.
And looking ahead, what do you see as the future of this industry, the future of financial planning, retirement planning? Where do you see it going? Any trends, technologies, strategies that you really think are going to shape the future here?
Well, I think, I briefly mentioned it before, but, as we look at the evolution of kind of where ISC was when we started versus now, specifically as it pertains to the private wealth arena, you've seen things go from kind of the stockbroker type approach to more of that kind of financial planner, financial coach, if you will. And so, one of the things that I really think is going to continue to grow out of that is that investments, while it helps our money grow, ultimately investments in kind of managed type approaches, it's somewhat commoditized. And so technology will certainly help us do that in a more efficient manner, and then also potentially even reduce fees. And so then it's okay, so what additional value do you bring? And not to debase what we do, if maybe that's how you might view it, but I look at it a lot like a personal trainer, right? So we all have access online. You could download apps where you can get a workout generated, and you can download nutritional stuff if you want to actually take the time to do that. But then how many of us actually take the time to implement that in our lives? And that's where, a personal trainer, nutritional coach comes into play. So in a similar fashion, from a financial services perspective, a lot of people, we all have name your social media platform and access to whatever news program. We all know kind of some of the basics of what we're supposed to be doing, but how many people are actually doing it? You need an accountability partner. And so I see that continuing to kind of evolve as the industry grows, and from a fee perspective, maybe even more so start to work its way into the same way kind of lawyers might bill, where it's more of an hourly type situation versus percentage of assets under management, or like 12B1 fees, that kind of thing.
And outside of your role or professional role, we'll say, any exciting investment opportunities or sectors that are really piquing your interest right now?
Yeah, so I'll go back to kind of the booming element of our business right now, and that's the structured product space. So I was fortunate enough to get to go to Boston a couple of times, but one time in particular at a conference called the Saltzman Associates Conference, where you sit down in a room with all the department heads of the major banks out there that are talking about how they're moving the structured product arena from the institutional space into the retail space. And to be involved in that, again, is extremely humbling, just kind of sitting in the room. But then from there, kind of listening to all these major banks talk about how they're going to allocate efforts towards building out the space, I think that there's a lot there. And with the advent of technology and the way that you can kind of, go in and put in all the various characteristics that you may want or don't want, I think that that's a very interesting investment strategy that obviously we're heavily invested into, but could really change the landscape of things, especially for kind of your wealthy client.
Perfect. Well, Jeff, I think that wraps up our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been a pleasure having you. We appreciate you taking the time to share insights and experiences with us today and our audience. Again, it's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And to all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the What Matters podcast. Stay tuned next time for more thought-provoking conversations ahead. Until next time, take care.